my being able to have dinner with my family or my partner matters. And then I could learn how to say no. And they kind of keep pushing that boundary out and out and out. And it's a beautiful thing to witness them then really choose to put themselves first.
All right, so Miss Elena Deutsch, welcome to the You Are a Lawyer podcast. How are you?
I am so great, Kyla. It's so good to be here with you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you. You and I connected last month, maybe a couple weeks ago, from LinkedIn. Somebody sent us an introduction email and just connecting us. And I want to talk about all the stuff we talked about then, the recordings you have for Will or
Yes.
WILL. But also, would you tell the audience a little bit about you and what you're doing?
Sure. So I am on a mission. My name is Elena Deutsch. I am actually not a lawyer. So I think it's important to say that up front at the beginning of the You Are a Lawyer podcast. But I am on a mission to help women and non-binary lawyers who feel stuck, unhappy, and I do work with men also. Don't want to leave the guys out. But mostly women who feel stuck, unhappy, and they know in their heart they're not in the right place, usually in big law, and they're not sure if they want to stay in the practice. They definitely want to get away from the billable hour and the soul crushing cultures in big law, and they don't know what else they want to do. And I am on a mission to help them figure out what lights them up and get them moving, creating momentum, taking action, and waking up every day with a smile on their face.
Yeah. So where did this come from? Do you have a lot of friends who were like really upset and were in this soul sucking work and they were like, okay, I need some help? Or how did you create all of it?
Yeah, I come to it because my dad was a lawyer, and as a kid, I always thought I was going to be a lawyer like him. And he had his own small private practice with a couple of business partners in New York City on the Upper West Side. And we would play trial around the table every night at dinner, not every night, but many nights. And we'd take turns playing the defense attorney, the judge, the jury, the prosecutor. And I always thought I would be a lawyer like him until one day he didn't come home that night, and he was okay. He was the next day, but he had lost his way ethically, and he had been arrested and got disbarred. And that path just pretty much closed up for me as an option. He was never the same again. His health faltered after that. And it really, I saw the toll it took on him. And so I went into public health and nonprofit work and I found coaching. And then I was coaching lawyers at really big firms. And as part of the work, it was helping them clarify their goals. So I'd ask these like amazing, smart, dynamic, hardworking, rising star associates what they wanted to do, what their goals were. And they would lean in and whisper and say, Elena, can I really talk to you about this? And I would say, yes, you can. It has to be a fit. And they would say, I don't want to stay here. I don't want to make partner. That life does not appeal to me. And I was working with one woman at a giant global firm, and her family was back in Europe, and she wanted to go home for her father's 60th birthday party. And she transferred everything over to the junior partner. And, they asked her to cancel her vacation. She said no. And, word on the street when she got back was that she'd left them in the lurch. And, I wasn't in there, but I trust that she had dotted every I and crossed every T. And, after that, she got very clear through our coaching. She wanted to go in-house to a startup that had the benefit of unlimited vacation days. And within 3 months, she got that. And when she said that detail, I got full body chills. And that was at a time in my life. I had just turned 50. My mom had died 2 years earlier. So I had all this, it's going to sound corny, but I'm okay being totally corny. I had all this extra love in my heart. I had a lot more to give. And the idea for Will, after success with these women lawyers, just came on me like a force. And I was journaling, I was on vacation, and that's sometimes when my best ideas will come in. And the words "women interested in leaving law" came out of my pen. And I've been kind of off to the races ever since then.
Yes. Wow. So I love that even though your father had a situation that didn't turn out the way that he would have wanted,
Yeah.
right? I do appreciate the fact that you were able to watch him and say, okay, this is not what I want.
Yeah.
Because I had almost no experience with lawyers before I went to law school. I had interned for a guy who was in like insurance defense law, but I was literally just like organizing file folders and putting them into the, the cabinet. Like I didn't actually realize, oh, if I wasn't doing this, you would be doing this. This is literally your job, right? And so I had no experience with lawyers prior to going
Mm-hmm.
to law school. So
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that you had that experience and it was enough for you to not even be arrogant with it, like, oh, I'm going to prove that I can do it in a different way.
Yeah.
You were just like, okay, let me look for something else.
Yeah, and I actually really do trace back. I have a lot of compassion for my dad. He was a criminal defense attorney. He spent a lot of time around criminals, and he lost his way, And I have a lot of compassion for him. And I think the seed for for Will was planted then, and then I'm here to help people find work that's aligned, that's meaningful, that is fulfilling. And so many of the people I work with, they want to help people. They want to do work that feels good. They want to help improve things. They want to serve clients in a way that's not, what often they'll say to me is, I don't want to make more money for banks or insurance companies. And they want to be able to lay their head down on the pillow at night and feel like I'm doing work that aligns with my soul.
Yeah, you want to make an impact because along with not knowing what lawyers did, I had no idea what big law was about either. My law school roommate was like, oh my God, I gotta go in big law. I gotta. I was thinking more environmental law, Army
Mm-hmm.
Corps of Engineers. And so I got out and I was like, okay, I'll do big law. Why not? And I was there for 5 years and I thrived only because I didn't know what to expect. All I knew was from what I saw on TV. And I was like, oh my God, big partner screaming at you. I don't have that. I must be crushing it. Right? I was like, oh, wow. So, the lack of dysfunction doesn't mean that it was a place I would have been thriving at or would have enjoyed in another experience. So I love the fact that you are able to be compassionate with these women and men who want to leave the law, that you're able to hold
Yeah.
that space for them to share those conversations because lawyers get really intertwined with their career in a way that being a lawyer and a practicing attorney becomes your identity.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's really hard to separate the two.
Yeah, totally. And so what I tell people, and I'm curious about your experience also, is that you never have to stop being a lawyer. Like, it's an important part of your identity. It's a feather in your cap. You've earned it. You worked hard for it. It's something to be proud of. It's something that you can leverage. You have gravitas when you walk in the room. People are like, ooh, the lawyer. Like, so use that. That is all yours, and no one can ever take it away from you. And, again, I'm curious about like your shift in identity, but that is definitely something that, let me just back up for a second. That people, about 60 to 70% of the women I work with, the people I work with, they continue practicing law in a different way. So it's not like 100% come into Will and they're like, I want to leave the law. Some do, and many don't. So it's really about finding a next right fit, whether that's opening your own firm or going to a different kind of firm, or working half time, or staying at your firm with different boundaries and a different mindset. But that identity piece for some people who do shift out of practice, and there's actually a woman who was a Will member, and she then went to coach training and she became a coach, and she's actually working on my team now. And for her, the shift in identity, giving it up, was something she really had to grieve. So I'm curious for you, like, about how's your identity shifted?
My identity has shifted so much. It's been a complete 180 in the best way possible. So the first thing that happened was I got a therapist, and I'm like, hey, I'm working 70, 75 hours, but I really like it. But I'm dating someone. How do I find the balance? And so my therapist was like, oh, let's talk about your childhood. That's not why I'm here. But she's like, no, we need to talk about it. So we get into Oh, I'm a middle child. I've always advocated for other people. It's really important for me to be a people pleaser. And if you ask for me to get it done by Thursday, I do it by Monday and all this whole thing. So we started talking about that, and then we got into work life integration,
Mm-hmm.
right? She's like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to have a balance, but how can you integrate the two?
Yeah.
And then I started looking for books, and I'm like, okay, because my whole thing was, I am a Juris Doctorate, I am a doctor of law. You cannot tell me anything. I have just mastered it all. I knew nothing. I knew nothing. Literally, if I would have walked into court, all I knew was to make sure I had the margins right. I knew nothing. So then I started picking up books like Big Magic from
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth Gilbert. And I'm like, okay, ideas circulate. Like, I love how the idea for Will came to you back when you saw your father, but then it still took years of you cultivating it before you actually did
Yep.
it. And
Yep.
then I started reading things like Unapologetically Ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well, how did somebody do that? And then The Entrepreneurial You. And I'm like, okay, Dory Clark, tell me more. And so I would read, and I feel like I had blinders on for a long time because something in me knew if I got back to my creative roots, I would leave. And I probably was
Mm-hmm.
afraid, right? Because I
Wow.
was like, no, I'm really enjoying this. This is so much fun. But the golden handcuffs were the fun part. I
Yeah.
was not creating the way I would have wanted to. So I started talking to lawyers, and I was like, wow, your life is interesting. You know what happened? I met an accountant in my firm who actually had a law degree. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, why aren't you practicing? And she's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's a whole big thing, but I love numbers. And I was like, are there more like you? And then I started talking to all these people. And then I was like, wait, I can replicate my salary doing creative stuff. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, oh, well,
Right.
So yeah, that's how it kind of spiraled for me.
Yeah, and it's like it's interesting. It's like one little chink of armor fell, and then and then you could like see through to like maybe a chink in the wall, right? Like fell through, and you could see there's this whole world out there. And so many of the people I work with, they've are K to JD. They just went straight from kindergarten through that JD, and they're this smart, ambitious, hardworking, high achieving women who love to learn. And they just they got on that track, and it's just everything's laid out right in front of you. Well, here come the recruiters. You do a summer internship and da, 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 and then you get an offer, and then off you go. And so it's really, I take and will members go through a process of self-discovery. They do that soul searching that I did in my early 20s, that most lawyers who go kind of straight to law school don't have to do. And so I really show them, and we do assessments like some of the things you've said. I have some ideas about what some of your top strengths are in the strengths finder assessment, and many of the women I work with have achiever and learner in their top five. Like, you're super awesome at executing. You get things done by Monday instead of Thursday, right? So those are things that they learn about themselves in will, and they're like, well, maybe they're not great at executing. Maybe they're really strategic, or they've got great communication skills and they're influencing. And so we have a member who she actually has gone to a marketing company. She left Big Law. She went to a marketing company that works with influencers, and she's got like a hybrid legal marketing role. And she herself wants to be an influencer. Like, she's really into fashion and fitness and lifestyle, and she's starting down that path, and it's really well suited to her strengths and how she wants to live her life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really important. I had a guest once who called it the law school conveyor belt,
Yes.
right? Because you just get busy. Oh, now I got to study for the LSAT. And then you get into school, and then, oh, now I have multiple schools. Which one? You never take a break and say, is this really what I want to do? When I
Exactly.
first thought about this in high school or middle school, or when someone told me I would be a great lawyer because I like to argue, have I
Exactly.
ever internalized that or thought about it? Or have I just been moving through the steps? And it's unfortunate that we have to wait until we're in our career, and then we're like, is this what it was supposed to look like?
Right.
It's really
And
not
that's,
fair.
well, it's yeah, and our culture is designed to like just get people on that conveyor belt. And that, like what you just said, is like, so many people have told me, I was told I should be a lawyer because I'm good at arguing. And So often the practice of law is so different than how it is presented on TV, or how it is, or even how the experience in law school is, what I hear from so many of my clients. And, like people come to Will at all stages. That sort of like light bulb moment of like, wait a minute, is this what I really want to be doing? Question. For some people, it's a first year associate and they're like, this is not for me. And I know I should stick it out for 2 years. And there's no reason why you can't, but why not alongside that? Let's figure out what you really want so you can start to lay some new tracks that are going to take you in a different direction. You know, and sometimes it's like eighth year associates or ninth year who are like, if I stay, I'm going to end up on that partner path. And I really don't want that. So there are these sort of, whenever that light bulb or that real question drops in, so we're here to help people figure it out.
I love that because when you enjoy arguing, at least for me, what it was that I've always been like cheering on the underdog, and I was really advocating, but that could have went in seven different ways, right? I could have become a social worker, or I could have just like I didn't have to become a lawyer, but because that's how lawyers are portrayed on TV, that's what people associate them with. So like from creating this podcast, I hope the one thing is that people are like, "Oh, it's cool that you are a lawyer, but you didn't have to be. You could have done X, Y, and Z."
Right.
Or even if you are that first or second year associate, okay, so maybe not all of this. Maybe I want a smaller firm or a boutique firm or to go do this or to create my own place that's less aggressive or less whatever, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll still be advocating. It's just that it doesn't have to be the way it is now.
Totally.
And I think we're honestly really afraid to have that conversation because who are you if you're not a lawyer? I
Yes.
had to go through that same grieving process where I'm just like, no, 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 no. I am the expert, right? How did I? And as soon as I realized you don't know everything, was when that was the first little tiny crack that fell. And I was like, wait. And then like all the sunlight rushed in and it was like, oh wow, and I don't know this and I don't know this. And thank goodness I wasn't a parent yet because oh my gosh. So yeah, it's
Great, because parenting challenges you also. Everything you don't know about parenting, about raising kids, right? It's
you
totally
know,
on the job training. Yes.
oh yeah, I won't even. I have a little daughter, and I won't even let people call her my mini me. I'm like, she is her own person. I make sure she does
Yes.
not get hurt
That's
because
that's my job. Keep her alive another
she
day.
has her own personality, her own. Nope, she is her own person, and I want to see her like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't want her to be. I do want her to be a voracious reader. I love to read. I am pushing that pretty hard.
Well, that's awesome. But I think that, that advocacy, that what else could you do with your natural strengths and interests and talents and skills, and whether it's, advocating for social policies or legislation that you stand behind, whether it's advocating for environmental stuff or advocating, like you said, for a client in a different way, or advocating for yourself and starting your own business. There's just 7 ways till Sunday and then some that you could use your strengths and skills. But, figuring that out is something that stumps a lot of people. Like, how do I figure this out? How do I take my what are my transferable skills? How do I talk about that either to a different kind of law firm or to a non-legal business that I want to get into? And that's what we help people do too. Yeah. Yeah.
Elena, what's the first step? Right? Because the podcast audience is made up by younger lawyers, 5 years
Mm-hmm.
practicing or less, or law students. If someone is listening and they're like, there's more, is their first step to go to your website or what?
Yeah, I would say at womeninterestedinleavinglaw.com, there's a free resource you can download called 11 Resources to Help You Create a Career and Life You Love. And there are books and TED Talks and podcasts, and I'm going to have to put yours on there next time I update it. And resources to help you start to think more broadly about who you are and the gifts you have. I love that you referenced Big Magic, Liz Gilbert. That's one of my favorite books. That's Creative Living Beyond Fear. And so many of the people who come to Will also have creative aspirations. They want to be writers or One woman has started a human design. She's doing human design and astrology. And as an entrepreneur, you have to write a lot. So, just start there. I would say if you want to have a conversation with me to see what will program is the right fit for you. The signature will program is something I call will transform, and it's a 6-month journey of really taking you from A to Z, of helping you discover what else it is you love to do, what lights you up, how to figure out what jobs fit with that, and then how to network and have informational conversations that open doors, and how to shift your mindset and keep taking action to build that momentum.
Yeah. And women interested in leaving law. I have a question in my mind. I'm trying to think about how to ask it. Um, I think what I want to say is if you are listening and you're kind of like, but I don't want to leave, I just want to talk about it. I feel like, Elena, you've already mentioned everyone doesn't have to leave. They might
Yeah.
just change the way that they're practicing,
Yes.
right? Could you share a little bit more about, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, and it doesn't have to be tomorrow, I'm not going back to work.
100%. Yes. Yeah, thank you for that question. Let me share a couple of stories because I think they illustrate it best. So there's a person who came, and they actually, after will, they came out as non-binary, and that was a part of their journey also. But they realized they didn't want to litigate for a big firm. They were doing employment law in California, and they opened their own firm. And then they also got a certificate in forest bathing. So, which is like, it's a Japanese, based in a Japanese, like going into nature and replenishing your energy by being in nature. So they have their own firm. They're working half as much as they used to or less, and making as much money or more. And they're starting to integrate their forest bathing into their like legal community, and are going to start taking lawyers out into nature to replenish. So, again, they didn't leave the practice of law. They leveraged their expertise and interests, and are getting to choose culture first clients, and clients who want to help prevent lawsuits and things, rather than being on the side of getting into the antagonistic legal battles. There's another Will alumni who started as a first year associate, and she went from big law to a boutique firm, and she's just left that. And now she's working for the city of Los Angeles. And so there's another member who left and went into like real estate project management. And then she came back, and she's actually working in government now, also in San Francisco. So there are people all over the country doing all sorts of things. And then, there are women who made, there's one woman I was working with, she made partner right within the first 3 months of our working together. And she's got young children. She chose to stay and be a different kind of partner and leader at her firm. And she tells the associates, no, do not email me over the weekend. I'm not checking my email. I don't want you to either. And one of her big things, she wanted to read, talk about reading. She wants to read books again. And last time we spoke, she's like, Elena, I just got back from the library and I've got a stack of books and I'm going to hang out this weekend and read. So you don't have to leave. I know it's women interested in leaving law, but the keyword is actually interested, not leaving.
Okay. Okay. I love that. And a lot of lawyers, we are obsessed with words. And I still keep thinking about your program, Will Transfer. That keeps ringing in my
Transform.
mind. Will
Mm-hmm.
Transform.
But transfer
That
is a
keeps
good word
ringing in my
too.
mind. Yeah, because I just read this book called, well, the title is its own, but it's called Unfuck Yourself.
Yep.
But it's by Gary John, and his whole thing, and I had never thought about it. And he was like, "What are you willing to do? If you want to look a certain way, you will get up and do this." And I was like, "What?" And it was so simple. What are you willing to do? WILL.
Yes.
And how many times have I written that word? And it just illuminated to me, and I was like, "Wow!" And you know what? It helps me even this morning. My alarm goes up at 5:10. I was like, I'm not willing to do that today.
Right.
I went back to bed. But
Right.
it created so much freedom to just be honest. What you're either willing to do it or you're not. It's none of this I ran out of time. Oh, I couldn't get to you're willing to do it or you're not.
Right. It's a choice. It's a choice. And I think, women often come into Will saying, I can't, I don't have time, I couldn't. And one of the very first practices we do with people is help them learn how to set boundaries in a way that create time for themselves again and make those choices of like, can I get on this community call? Can I block an hour for a coaching session? And that for many people at the very beginning feels extremely challenging. And we hold their hand through that and see, but then when they take that first step or they say, no, I can't get it to you by 5 p.m., but I can get it to you by noon tomorrow. And they set that boundary, or no, I'm not going to get on a call. There was like a third year associate, and she shared this success because we share celebrations every week on our community calls. And she said a partner had called her, and it was during the pandemic, and he expected her to be on a call with him on Sunday night at 8 p.m. And I was doing a special thing then on Sunday nights. And she said, no, I can't do that, but I can meet with you on Tuesday, and he was like, okay, great. But and she saw that nothing bad happened. The sky didn't fall. She didn't get fired. She didn't get yelled at. And that once people start saying, I'm not willing to do that because my sleep matters, my mental health matters, my being able to have dinner with my family or my partner matters. And that comes first. And then I can learn how to say no. And they kind of keep pushing that boundary out and out and out. And it's a beautiful thing to witness them then really choose to put themselves first.
Yeah, because you mentioned it earlier about lawyers not forgetting who they are and they're never going to lose their legal training. You will never lose it. I don't care if it's when you buy your first house and you're really reading through the contract. You will never lose our, curiosity and all of it. You'll never lose it. But we also tend to be catastrophists because
Yes.
we are used to seeing the worst situation, right? You only come to a lawyer if you can't handle something. And so you're like, oh, let these two handle it, let a judge handle it. And so I'm sure that person was terrified to say, no, I can't do it now. I can do it Tuesday. And then when you do assert yourself and advocate for yourself, and then there's no terrible thing, the sky didn't fall, you didn't lose your job that moment. And you're like, oh, wow. Right. And it's sad that we have to remember that we can advocate for ourselves. But I
Exactly.
love that the Will program is helping people with that.
Totally. And it really builds that muscle. It really builds that muscle, which women, people of color, queer people are not typically trained to feel like it's okay for me to put myself first and not just kind of kill myself for my job. So, uh, yes, I want people to be alive, vibrant, healthy. So, I mean, is that so crazy? Like, no, like, don't you like to have a career that is fulfilling, that's enriching? Like you said, I love how you said, have an impact and be able to, like you said, have go on vacation without your laptop, without having to check email, and really be able to be present in your life.
Yeah. It's important because you need this time so that you can read books. Talk to me. Email me if you need some recommendations. I read like 3 to 4 books a week.
You read 3 to 4 books a week.
I do. I do a book review every Monday on YouTube, and it's either a fiction book or nonfiction. I just finished Think and Grow Rich. I read that every year. I
You
read
read
Big
it every
Magic every
year. Yeah.
year.
Do you? It's
Um,
yeah, that's
it's
great.
incredible. I'm reading right now Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life by
Nice.
Bob Proctor.
He's a classic mindset. These
Yes,
are,
and then
you know, go ahead.
he just told me about, well, every time someone mentions a book in a book, I have to write it down. There's a
Yes.
book called What You Think About Me Is None of My Business.
I love that. That's a phrase I share often and will, is like, other people's
Wow.
opinion of me
Yes.
is none of my business.
I'd
And
never heard of the author,
whew,
and so I
I
just
didn't know it was
had
a whole
that on my list.
book, but
It
even just as
is.
as a phrase, I mean, it's a book in a sentence.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. So yeah, I absolutely am obsessed with reading. I don't watch too much TV. So when I'm not recording these podcasts, I will
Yeah.
be upstairs reading or listening to an audiobook doing laundry. I love reading. So yeah.
That is so good. That is so
Mm-hmm.
good. What's like for your entrepreneurial journey and for your transition out of law, what maybe were 1 or 2 books that have been most impactful for you?
The first one would be We Should All Be Millionaires by
Yes.
Rachel Rogers.
Rachel Rogers, yes.
Phenomenal. For one, written by a lawyer.
Yes.
So there's a different kind of, and it's so practical. It's so realistic. That one's one of my favorites. And then, or The Most Powerful Woman in the Room. That one's really good. I can't think of the author, but she was I can't think of it, but she's like an auctioneer. And she's like a little tiny diminutive person. And she was like, but I walk into the room and I'm the most powerful woman in the room, because she teaches how to negotiate. She writes about how, to tell your husband, if you're making breakfast for the kids, make me some toast too. What's wrong with that? It's an amazing book. Those are the two I would definitely say people should read, because they're very different, but they will spark something in you that I just haven't been able to shake. So
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
They're both, I've been familiar with Rachel Rogers and listened to her podcast and work for years, but I haven't read The Most Powerful Woman in the Room. So thank you.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Elena. Do you have any other information or advice for the audience?
I think in closing, I want to say, if they can do it, if Kyla can do it, you can do it too. I know this podcast is an inspiration to many people and has incredible stories. So listen to this podcast, listen to stories, talk to other lawyers who've done it, like you did with the accountant. Like, how did you do this? In your firm, there's probably knowledge management and associate development people. That's something a number of Will members have transitioned to. Some have stayed in their firms, but gone into those kinds of roles. But at the core of it is, what do you want? And that you're allowed to build your life and your career to your liking, to suit you first. You don't have to try and be a round peg in a square hole.
Yep, absolutely. Because it's your life. Don't spend it miserably. Please don't. So yeah.
Exactly. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This was a pleasure, and I know the audience is going to enjoy it. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.